Good afternoon, LD4. This is Sandra Christensen coming to you again live on the Voice of the People podcast. And today we're going to have a special time today because I did have a guest lined up, and she is my good friend, Heather Rooks, who is the board president of the Peoria Unified School District. Heather is going through some challenges right now for being a voice for parents and student safety. And so because of what's going on in her school district today, she's unable to be with me today. But we're going to do something fun. We're going to have a live town hall type session today because I do want to talk about student safety. Heather and I were going to discuss something very important, and that's how do we, as board members and the general public, teachers, constituents on schools, keep students safe. Because when parents send their kids to school, there's two things that they expect. One is that they can educate them, they learn reading, writing, math, the arts and sports as well. But it's assumed that your students and your children will be safe when you send them to school. So that's one of the things that I want to talk about today. And I'm happy to take questions from the audience as well on any topic. But this particular topic is near and dear to my heart. So I want to start with a recent article that came out from AZ Free News on May 3rd, just a couple days ago. And the title of the article says, "Family intends to sue Phoenix Elementary School after girl assaulted by illegal immigrant." So this kind of touches two really big issues that Arizona is facing since we are a border state and we have some concerns in our schools, at least in recent months. The article goes on to say that the Orangewood Elementary School in Phoenix may soon be sued for alleged security failures by the family of a 10-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted by a criminal alien. And then it goes on to give information on that. So if you want to find that article, it was the May 3rd issue, AZ Free News. And it really brings to mind a greater problem. So as I mentioned, parents expect their children to be safe. But when districts fail to protect children, then the children are the ones that suffer. In my own district, as I've mentioned before, I serve on the Paradise Valley Unified School District. And even my own district, we have fallen short a few times for protecting students. An issue that we've had in the past was students dating teachers. Now, I understand that when you're in the high school level, that some individuals say that it's a new term called minor attracted persons when somebody is attracted to a young person. But coming from my generation, I'm a little bit old school. To me, you call a spade, and it's pedophilia. If you are an adult person that is in a school and responsible for keeping students safe, you should never date a student. So that's what I'm starting with today. I'm going in for the kill, I guess, if you will, and just talking about a very uncomfortable subject. I want to read something that each of us are responsible for. Anyone that is working with kids, we are mandatory reporters. That said, there is a 2026 case out of Michigan, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but Lukuhi versus Rochester Community School District. And it's really worth taking a look at because an elected board member was censured and lost her responsibilities after speaking directly to her community about a public issue. Now, this is kind of what's happened with our friend Heather Rooks. She was standing strong, protecting children, but she took that a step further and she did speak to the media. Now, it's a very interesting situation because you would think that people would rally to her cry and protect because nobody wants a student to be harmed. But the opposite actually occurred in Heather's case, where she spoke out strongly against what happened at one of her high schools, Centennial, and a group of individuals that I won't name came out and are now asking for her to step down as board president. And why should that occur? Well, I have some suspicions, but my personal views in this matter, having known Heather, is she is strong, and she's standing strong to protect children. However, there are forces that want to protect the system. And so that's what I want to start with today. So, again, we're live and we're taking questions. So if anybody wants to chime in with questions on this matter, I'm happy to discuss it. My role as governing board member is to be the voice of the people. Every elected official should represent their constituents. And on a school board, it's so important to ensure that children are safe. We talked a little bit last week about an issue with my own school district and free speech. So there's a couple of things happening here in today's society. Do elected board members have free speech? And if so, how far can they take it, right? So we're going to talk about a tale of two board presidents right now. So we have Heather on one hand, who is standing strong to protect children, and she's trying to be silenced at every turn. And the powers that be don't want her to call attention to the high school and the situation that happened in her school. My school district, on the other hand, as we discussed a little bit last week, we also have a board president that has made statements, and I will defend anybody's right for free speech because I'm a constitutionalist, and I know that just because you're an elected official, it does not mean that your First Amendment rights are taken away as a board member. As a board member, we also have to deal with the will of the board. So we cannot speak on behalf of the entire board. Usually it's a 5-member board, but we do have our own opinions and we can state that. What happened in Paradise Valley last week, though, took it a step further. So our board member, Mr. Pantera, who is our board president, had 2 posts. One of them was fairly benign. It was a call I think it was May Day, something of that nature. It was on May 1st for people to not go to work, not go to schools, and to stay home and to not buy anything. So, my opinion, free speech, he's allowed to post. But the second post is what really upset a lot of people in my district, and it made national news, and I think a lot of people got a hold of that second post, and it was calling, I have to be very careful because I don't want to disparage a board member, but basically it was inciting violence. I will say that. As elected officials, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And in my opinion, yes, we have free speech, but elected officials, board members cannot incite violence. Our schools represent the children there in the schools, the students, also the teachers, administration, and the public, and you. We are your voice. And when we make statements that incite violence or may call for things that are illegal, then we need to take pause. So, going back to Heather's story, what did she do? What was her crime? Why are they asking her to step down as board president? And I will be quite honest, I don't follow other school boards closely. I'm like you, I've seen the news stories. But in my opinion, Heather is a hero, and she's standing strong, and she's standing for the kids. So That's all I'm going to say on this topic right now. And the reason I wanted to start with this is because I was going to have her on as a guest today, but because of circumstances, she's unable to be here today. I would like to see if there's any other questions before we move on to our next topic.
We do have a question coming in from YouTube Live. It is just, how does faith play into your decision making to serve?
That is an amazing question. So when I first ran for school board 6-7 years ago, when I was deciding to do this, I was putting materials together and I didn't know what I was doing. Many of us don't when we want to run for the first time. But my Moms in Prayer friends and my church prayed me into this role as school board member. So faith, in my case, is the most important thing. I think everything that I do, everything that I strive to do with integrity and treating people with fairness and kindness comes from my faith. And so to me, faith is very important. It's very interesting because when I was putting my campaign material together and building my website, I had a line about God. I don't remember exactly what I put. And somebody told me, well, I've been in politics a long time and I would remove that because you're going to offend somebody. So what did I do? I made it bigger and I put it at the top of my website because I can't separate myself from my faith. That's part of my identity. It's part of who I am as a person. And I'm unashamed to be a Christian. And that isn't to say that I will demean other faiths, but that's who I am. So it's a very important part. So I appreciate the question. And yeah, I wanted, is there another question? Because I might take this a little further.
Yeah, and actually, I have a question from the audience here, just to expand on the faith.
Yes.
In the classroom.
Yes.
Right. What is your position with faith in the classroom?
So there is a lot of debate about separation of church and state, right? And we've all heard it, right? I thought it was in, like, before I was well versed in all of these things, I thought it was in the Declaration of Independence or in the Bill of Rights or something, because we hear that all the time, separation of church and state. It's not in the Constitution. Where that came up is our founding fathers. They built all of our rules and our morals came from the Bible, actually. And so a lot of people don't know this, but I have taken a lot of classes on the Constitution and biblical citizen classes. So the way that came about is our founding fathers were men of faith. And I will say men because they were men, and it's okay to say men. They were men of faith. And they built our Constitution and our republic on these principles, right? And so where separation of church and state came in later because we did not want to have a Church of England. We didn't want to have somebody coming in from the federal or state level saying you have to be Presbyterian, for instance. That's really the whole intent of separation of church and state. Now, fast forward a few more millennium, or a few more decades, I will say, we used to have schoolhouses, right? And many of those schools were in churches. And we taught things such as ABCs. They were from different proverbs. They were from different, and I can't remember what it was called, but they would learn their ABCs, and they were all based on Bible scriptures. So fast forward to today, we live in a very divisive society, and people claim separation of church and state. I've been called a Christian nationalist, for instance. I normally don't wear my faith on my sleeve when I'm on the dais, but one particular board meeting, I did read scripture from the dais because somebody had died. And I knew I was going to get some information and some feedback from that. I did get a couple of emails that were negative and said separation of church and state. But I did my homework, and I knew that I do, number one, have the constitutional right to say that and to have my religious freedom, and it does not go away because I am an elected official. So there are groups that can come on campus and they can be faith-based. And so the important thing to know is that these clubs are student-led. So it is not illegal to talk about God. It is not illegal to actually bring Bibles to school. So, you know, I'm going to get away from schools a bit. And even in other government places, did you know that at our state capitol, they pray? The legislators, they pray. And I've been to a couple of prayer breakfasts here in Arizona. And so the idea of separation of church and state has actually lost its true meaning. And so when I'm elected to the legislature, I will continue to protect individuals' rights to pray or to not pray, because having that responsibility also means to protect the people that don't want to pray and don't have faith. But for me, because I am a Christian, I will support the right of anyone to pray, whether it's in school or in the state legislature.
We had another question coming in from the YouTube Live. How will your beliefs about DEI impact your action in the House?
I love this question. So, with a name like Christensen, many people don't know that I'm Latina, 100% full-blooded Latina. My maiden name is Montes. I grew up in New Mexico. My mother is a Lujan, and my dad is a Montes. So they call it a mestizo, right? And so the reason I'm telling you this is because it gives context to this question about DEI. When I was growing up in New Mexico, I didn't know that I was a minority because we didn't really talk about that. Again, I'm Gen Xer, 70s, 80s kid, right, growing up. We didn't talk about that. We didn't focus. My parents, very hardworking people, they taught me to treat people with respect and work hard. So I'd never heard of diversity, equity, inclusion. I think the words separate are good words and they don't mean well, but when you put them in that context, diversity, equity, inclusion, it really does a disservice to people. And I mentioned it in the podcast, in the live stream last week when my friend Derek was here. He is a Black man. I am a Latina, a Hispanic woman. And we talked about the term people of color. I don't personally like that term because it puts people in boxes. So I don't think DEI has a place in schools, in our government, in society, because we are all Americans. We all deserve respect and to not be bullied in the schools. We deserve a good education. And so it does us a disservice to do that and to focus so much on race, so much on your gender ideology or anything like that. And so that's my stance. I don't think there's a place for it. And thank you for the question.
Okay, so we have another question here from the audience. I've heard people say, because you came from LD3, that you're too conservative for LD4. I've also heard you were, in the past, a Democrat and also an independent.
Yes.
What's the truth? Where are you here?
So something in the middle. So I'm really happy that that question came up because that comes up a lot when I'm doing speaking engagements. So there's a lot of people don't know where their legislative districts are. So I serve on the Paradise Valley School Board, and it happens to be in Legislative District 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's a huge school district. So when I put my house on the market about a year and a half ago, I was living in District 3. And so I served as a precinct committeeman there in District 3. Now, District 3, in terms of politics, tends to be a little bit more conservative than District 4, which is considered more of a purple district. But that's the story. So I sold my house and I moved closer to the district offices. It was taking me 25 minutes to get to the school board meetings and from District 3. When I moved close to Horizon, where my son graduated, now it takes me about 10 minutes to get there. So the question is, am I too conservative for District 4? That makes me laugh because is it too conservative to want great schools? Is it too conservative to want a strong, thriving economy with lower taxes? Is it too conservative to want safety? I will argue that even Democrats want that because my family is Democrat. Yes, I grew up Democrat. I was an independent most of my adult life. When I ran for office, I felt that I needed to choose a party that aligned closely with my values, and that's when I changed my party to become a registered Republican. And although I am a Republican, I think I'm in a wonderful position to be empathetic to everybody because I have been all parties. I'm on a school board. I'm the only Republican on that board, and I'm able to get stuff done. I'm able to treat people with respect. I still hold strong values, and I hold the line: fiscal responsibility, keeping students safe, school choice, but I don't have to beat people over the head with the Republican mantra to get my point across. So I actually really like that question because I have such a diverse background, and I think I see things a little bit differently because I don't just look at party line identity. Yep.
I have another question coming in from the YouTube Live. This one about, you've mentioned the Mississippi Miracle. Can you explain to us kind of just what that is and how it can be beneficial to Arizona?
Okay. So yeah, that must have been somebody that heard me speak before. So my number one reason for running is I want to make schools centers of academic excellence. And in order to do that, just throwing more money at the schools is not going to cut it. So I did print out some data today in case that information came up, in case that question came up, because I wanted to get this right. So Mississippi used to be Arizona. They used to rank nearly last in every category. In 2013, they were nationally ranked in fourth grade reading 49th. And today, I have 2024 results. They were tied for 8th. How did they go from 49th to 8th? I will argue that Mississippi doesn't have the same demographics as a Boston, or Massachusetts, if you will, California, or some of the other bluer states that have really a good reputation for great test scores, reading rates. They also, I'm looking at their national standing. So in 2013, their baseline, they were bottom of the country. Now they're outperforming wealthier states. So again, what did they do? So the Mississippi Miracle here. So they were performing very low levels. They went back to the basics. I remember Hooked on Phonics. So that's what Mississippi did. They started with reading because that was where they were really performing low. And they focused and they kind of stayed in their own lane. I will argue today, schools want to be everything. They want to treat the whole child. But if you can't get the basics right in academics, reading, writing, math, then all that other stuff, the behavior stuff and the mental health, you can't do that. You have to outsource that to parents and medical professionals. Schools are not equipped to deal with those things, in my humble opinion. So where Arizona can learn from Mississippi is going back to the basics. They took a hard look at what they were doing, and they really went back to basics, like I mentioned, phonics. For those of you that haven't gone through the education system recently, we've gone away from phonics and we've gone to whole word and whole word reading. I can't remember the exact term of it, but it causes a lot of confusion for children rather than phonetically trying to sound things out and spelling things. So that's kind of the Mississippi Miracle, and there's more to it, but I'm not going to go through all of their stuff. But the moral of the story is they were nearly dead last in every category, similar to where Arizona is at. But getting back to the basics and really going and focusing on the important things in education really helped Mississippi a lot. And it wasn't about the money, and it wasn't even about their socioeconomic areas, because I will argue that Mississippi is a very high Black population and a lot of minorities, groups. So they're outperforming even, like I said, some of our wealthiest states. So that's kind of the Mississippi miracle. Getting back to basics.
Another question coming in from the YouTube Live again. On this kind of realm of education, what is your own personal educational background?
So I graduated from New Mexico State in 1994. I mentioned I grew up in New Mexico. I studied business and information technology. Back then, it was called business computer systems, because I am old and I grew up when they were just developing PCs. So it was funny when I say I was an IT project manager, people think, oh, you probably know all this high-tech stuff. Well, I was a COBOL programmer starting out, so that was a long time ago. But my background is business and technology, and that's my BBA. But I also took a lot of other classes. So when I was at Honeywell, I did take a lot of master's degree classes in information technology and business. And then I did a bit of a spin. So let me remember the year. So in 2004, 2003 area, I had been working for tech companies. My husband and I were empty nesters, and I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I went back to school to study veterinary medicine, because I had always wanted to be a veterinarian. I always, when I was a young kid, I often brought home stray dogs, and I just always loved animals. So I did get into UC Davis School of Vet Med, but at the same time, I had a child. And so as an older student, while I was passing my classes, it was very difficult trying to raise a newborn baby and going to school. So I did make it through 3 years of my 4-year doctorate. I was just 1 year shy going into my teaching at the veterinary teaching hospital. But I'm proud of that accomplishment, because UC Davis School of Vet Med is always one of the top 5 in the world, not just in the nation. So I'm very proud of that accomplishment. And after that, I ended up being a practice manager for a very large hospital that I ran in Central Phoenix, which was called Alta Vista Veterinary Hospital. So it's so interesting when you show up, and God uses everything, even things that you think may be mistakes, like not finishing school. He used it. And because I had that strong business background and a love for animals, I was able to come on board as a practice manager for a large veterinary hospital and use my skills both in veterinary medicine and in business. And I did very well at that.
Okay, so we have another question here from the audience, and we're running out of time here, so this will be our last question, and we're going to totally switch gears on you.
Great.
All right, so this question is going to be pertaining to something that's near and dear to everybody, regardless of party lines. What is your take on the water crisis for Arizona?
So this is a great question, and I was very naive when I first jumped into this race, because my take on water was, hey, we live in a desert. There's not enough water for everybody, and our population keeps growing. I was very wrong that it was that simple. So the water situation here in Arizona is a very complex one. So what I did, since I was not knowledgeable, I sought out the experts. So Amanda Moniz is a good friend of mine. I served with her as a precinct committeeman in District 3, and she has endorsed my campaign. She's endorsed my race. She sat down with me for 3 hours and explained the history of water. I didn't realize that there were decisions that were made by this Arizona Supreme Court so many years ago that really are affecting what is occurring with water today. For instance, did you know that before, and I'm not even going to pretend to remember the year, but we used to own everything from, I think they called it from the sky to the ground. And so if you had a homestead and you had well water, well, you owned that water outright. a Supreme Court case came through because somebody had come into an area, and for the greater good, they drilled wells, and they kind of, it's my understanding that a lot of the homeowners then lost their water. But that Supreme Court decision said, well, it was for the greater good, so it was allowed. And so I would like to see us getting back to more personal rights, but I digress on that. So that was just one thing that I didn't know. The other thing was desalinization. So desalinization is also very complicated. I had heard that in Yuma, we had a desalinization plant. Now, for those of you that don't know what that is, we take ocean water or salt water and we bring it, and then we take the salt out. That's simplifying it very much. It is a complicated process, but what makes it difficult is, what do you do with the salt afterwards? Because you can't have these marshy, salty lands, because then it's bad for the environment, it's bad for the animals, and it's very expensive. And so it was my understanding that in Yuma, we had put millions of dollars into this desal plant, and then it wasn't successful after a while because it wasn't thought through enough, or I don't know if it was regulations, things of that nature. But that was something that I was also learning about. So that is an option. We can take water from Mexico and process it, but we have to have better and smarter ways to use the desalinization. The other thing that I found out, I spoke with another individual who does deep water drilling. And so this term is called pure water. I keep hearing that we're running out of water in Arizona, but this individual who's an expert in deep drilling says that we do have plenty of water, not just in our aquifers, but if we do deep drilling and think about other options for water, that we do have plenty of water. I'm going to just do 2 more points and then I'll wrap up on the water topic. But there are some challenges going forward because the Upper Basin, Colorado River states, we're fighting over water rights, and that needs to be settled. I'm not going to weigh in on that today, but just know that I am doing research on that. There is also some newer technologies that have helped to clean up our water. And it's not a very attractive campaign marketing thing right now, because I've heard it called from the toilet to the tap. And so I don't know, it just doesn't sound very appealing to me. But what I will say is we do have really good technologies that are cleaning up reclaimed water and old water, and the filtration systems are getting better. So as technology increases and gets better, then we can have better options for water. So I will continue to do more research on the water. I may have flubbed up a couple of the stories because I was speaking off the cuff, taking a question from the audience, but I will continue to do more research on this matter. And so we're going to wrap up for today, but I appreciate you doing this town hall live with me. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you know that I'm here for you. I'm Sandra Christensen, and I am the voice of the people for LD4. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you remember that I'm going live every Tuesday and Thursday from now until Election Day, and I'm here to take your live questions. Thank you, and have a blessed day.